started setting up in GitHub, thanks to Adrian pointing out that we could do it at the organization level. So that was the logic. Meet every week, but see if we can lay down some milestones every other week.
Great. I forgot. I always forget to record, so I just hit the record button, so we're sort of officially started.
Okay. I think we had some other people looking. It's funny because I run my own media invite for this, so we don't forget, and I screwed that up, so I doubled the confusion here.
Okay. I think. Hi, Neil. I think Neil just joined us.
There we go.
Hi, Neil.
Okay. Good. Okay. Good. Nope, they're pinging me about something else.
Can I just start quickly by asking Neil? Neil, did you get your sensor?
Hello. Yes, I got sensors last Thursday, very, very quickly. I did check the package, and I was going to show it to a friend, but I've had so many other bugs I'm dealing with. I've got to complete those before I try my new project.
Great. Let us know any issues along the way. It'd be great to see a sensor pop up in California, right?
Yeah, I'm just afraid I ran into another protocol bug on something else, and it was like Friday, and it was like, I got to sort this out and get that bit of software released. I'm sure you know the story.
I also invested $10 in a ESP32 here. So am I am I an accelerometer away from a sensor? Could I?
No, I mean, you could just connect that, flash it with the firmware. Now it won't do any. Well, it'll connect, and you'll be able to send commands to it.
Yeah,
you won't get any data from it. So you could shake it all you want. It's not going to trip.
Yeah, it doesn't have a yeah.
But it'll appear in the dashboard, and you'll be able to control it. Send commands to it. It won't. You could tell it to be an earthquake alert, but again, you don't have a buzzer or an LED.
Oh, that's true. So how many more parts are there? There's the buzzer. There's the accelerometer. There's the
LED.
LED.
Those 3 pieces.
I looked at that. I was great to see that. I mean, that might be nice to publish that part there on there, but I was thinking from a test point of view, I'm always thinking from testing, is it would actually be really nice to have some of those without the accelerometer on them, just the basic board. I was looking at it, and then can you take the basic board, plug that device on it with the LEDs, because having a reasonably full system for doing testing is very valuable, but the accelerometer is really just the the critical part of it, but it's not for the software integration testing.
Absolutely. And Neil, I thought about something similar actually, because there is an alternative that we could populate the same board with another analog devices accelerometer. There's a cheaper one called the 353, I think, or I can't remember the name, but it's instead of $60, it's $10, and it's just less sensitive, but it would still give you data. So we could always look at that as an alternative. And because it's in the same family of accelerometers, the code should work for both devices, I've been told. So we can explore that one day, I suppose.
But I would think just having the basic board for testing that can be sent around for these type of events, because there's not a lot of events that go on there. I mean, actually create a simulation of what a test waveform would be like. So that would be injected in a test framework to be able to test it out periodically, but some way of identifying this is a test board for testing the whole stack.
Well, presumably the one that Ryan has could be used. I mean, if we could give it a dummy JSON that it could be sending instead of from an actual accelerometer.
But I mean,
sorry.
But the whole thing is those are for firmware testing, testing the device, it's that whole everything, including the LEDs and the buzzer, what it looks like. So, having the board and not proliferating, not making it a real something that somebody might try and use. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out.
That's a good idea. Do you know what might be interesting there, Neil, is if you take away the accelerometer, it's actually not very expensive to make in China. I could think of maybe trying to post a link. I know JCL PCB, or one of those people, they have a link to a supplier which has all the components apart from the accelerometer we need. So potentially it could be a one-click stop for someone who wants to do that. Let me see if I can put something together and I'll share it with you. Because that could be quite affordable. Okay, so where shall we start today, guys? I think, John, didn't you guys have a discussion recently about the sprint? And how do you want to do this, Cole?
Yeah. Well, on Friday we talked about divvying up some of the work. But I didn't take notes specifically for everyone. I took my own notes. Kristen posted notes for the group. So we might be able to refer back to those. I know what I was working on, but I don't want to jump straight to that.
And we also have from the meeting on Monday with Asaf and Adrian, we had some outcomes from that as well. So we need to find a way to capture all of this, right?
Yeah, so what I always try to do if I'm going to hold a meeting, and we really want to use open governance. So it's okay to have a private meeting and a private chat, and make decisions, but then come back to the broader group and say, we met, we talked, this is sort of the outcomes that we had. That way we're all kind of sharing on what the progress is. Just a good way to continue, really believing in the open governance and the open source ethos.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we published anything from the chat on Monday, did we?
We didn't, because we got derailed on that because we talked about putting it in the forum on the OpenEEW. You gave us a link on that Monday, and then we stopped there. Like that was like the end of the conversation.
We got distracted by the tools again, discussion on what tools to use.
Yeah. Sometimes an imperfect tool is better than nothing.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess in a nutshell, what came out of that meeting was there's two what I would consider microservices. I mean, they're not really big, but two services that we would have to add to OpenEEW. One is, I believe, so John volunteered to make a prototype for that, which is writing to CloudEnt, so taking data from MQTT, writing it to CloudEnt, and then Vaclav volunteered to work on the other service that pulls from MQTT and then dumps it into AWS. So those are the two key things that came out of that. And then, of course, we talked a lot about the seismology algorithms and stuff like that. I'll let Vaclav talk about it.
Yeah, I can, if I can share my screen for a second, I'll just show you.
Useful.
Sorry.
Just before you get started, myself, I wanted to add here that I think we should really make a big effort to make the seismology aspect more accessible or to publish it. I think there's so many people who could potentially help with this aspect, and you're really on your own here. And I wonder if there's some way to make it more accessible to seismologists, or if there's some forum that we should be publishing this in, or some way to reach out to people to get help.
Yeah, I'll think about that. I think that I was kind of trying to get the basic architecture settled before we reach out to people, because I think that would be somewhat hard to join right now. And I kind of wanted to have the basic structure laid out. But yeah, you're right that like more people definitely do more work, and there's a lot of work on that for sure. So yeah, I'll think about the ways how to reach out. It's somewhat more, I think, seismology. There's not that many seismologists out there. It's and like those things are a little bit more, those codes are like written in gibberish, and it's harder to read and harder to contribute and stuff like that. I think it's not as standard as like some of the IT things, but I'll definitely think about it, how to make it more accessible and like so we can get more help from people.
Okay, because if you look at, say, the OBSPy project, which is for people who don't know, it's a Python open source library for seismology. It seems to have a really active community, so they've somehow managed to get a lot of people.
Yeah, you are right. Yeah, definitely we should do that. Yeah. Yeah, I'll think about ways how to do that. The only thing that I wanted to show right now, like, was what Adrian was saying, that like how we decided to make the structure of the data flow that like from sensors is going to go to MQTT, and then there is going to be a few or like 3 basic microservices. It's going to be the seismology algorithm that is going to read in the traces and then publish events and detections to MQTT. And then the 2 microservices, one is going to take the traces and write to AWS free storage, which I'm working on right now. So it's going to write it in there in the JSON-L format and in the miniseed. And then the write to IBM microservice is going to take the events and detections and write them to CloudEnd. And then there may be some other region-specific scripts or microservices that do some work that if someone wants to do something else with the data, like Puerto Rico or Nepal. And then we thought about a little bit about the data structure in AWS free storage that we might do some restructuring in there, but that's relatively minor. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so as far as like MVP is concerned, I believe on his diagram, we viewed the seismology and the 2 microservices, so the first 3 things as MVP for May 25th for part of the ecosystem here. So the 2 microservices should be in their own repositories. They'll be containerized and then deployed into the cloud. It's to be decided whether or not we'll put them in Kubernetes or use something like Cloud Engine to run those.
Good. And by the way, what I've been doing too in the meantime with the seismology repo, I just put in the same milestones that we had. There's 2-week things, so maybe we can figure out what's left to do here and map it into when we need it done by. That'd be great.
So this now goes straight into the master project that you just shared.
Yeah, so I think there's a project that's at the top level, which is at the org level. The problem is you can't set milestones at the org level, it seems. The issues that you can gather from all the repos underneath the org, within those repos, apparently you need separate milestones. So I was just creating the 4 out there in a couple of repos I just started with. So the main OpenEEW one has it. OpenEEW seismology does. I'll do it for the other ones as well. But that way, each task within each repo can stay with the repo, and they can map to a milestone, and we can see all of that from the org level project, which is what the link is.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I need to add some things there as well. So we all just add to our specific project, and it will just populate that master project.
The master one, I think you have to add to it. So by default, that master Kanban board won't have every issue listed in it. You'll only select the ones you can search for. Then you drag them in and put them in there. So there may be irrelevant ones. There may be old issues that the community opened back in August that we just never closed. Those won't pop up automatically. If we had done the board by repo, it would have automatically shown the new issues, but at the org level, it doesn't appear to do that, or at least not by default. Maybe we can connect it to do that for every new open issue to drop it in. But in any case, yes. So keep the issues within the subrepos. I'm adding milestones there that you can map them to, and then we can drag them into the overall board as we prioritize what we need to get done.
So I think you can. It looks like there's like some knobs on each of the to-dos and progress. There's a manage on the bottom with some checkboxes. So that may help with some of this automation, like automatically creating issues or adding it to here.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not sure because it's so the manage automation for to-do for the top level org, it says new issues will be automatically added. Do you want to just do a quick test and we'll see if it does it automatically? I know it won't pull in all the ones that are already open, but if we have new issues by default, maybe we can at least have that knob set.
I know I had to go and specifically select the milestone.
Yeah, that part I think you still do when you drill into the issue itself. but it needs to have the milestones set within its own source repo.
One question for the team here. I missed the dashboard meeting on Friday, and I know Kristen presented a sort of template, a draft. But did we talk about the actual documentation structure in any way for the website? Because that's something I wanted to get cracking on. No.
Which documentation for the, or which website for the static OpenEEW.com?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just opened. There's an issue I opened. If you look at that board, the project board, there's 2 open issues. One was carbonizing the website, and then one was update OpenEEW to make it better for new users.
Oh yeah, I get it.
So that one has the feedback from the other person in Slack, but it doesn't have anything from the dashboard calls.
Oh, you put a lot of work into that. Right. Yeah.
Well, I just copied it. Yeah, Gregor's. It took me more work to spell his name right than it was to copy it.
Okay.
But anyway, this was what he suggested. So this was specifically for OpenEEW.com. If we had any other tasks, they would be in the dashboard.
That's great. Let me reply to that one then. That's perfect. I didn't see it. Great.
All right, so Daniel, I created a new issue. It didn't automatically show up. I mean, you gotta, when you create the new issue, you have to select the project and then it'll show up. But yeah, you can't do a bulk change either. I can't see anything like that.
Okay, so yeah, then and it's kind of a little wonky in how you see it, but in any case, on that board, if you pull up that thing, you'll see ones that are on the board, and on the right, in the far right, it says add cards. It's a plus sign. That's actually the set of issues. Cards are kind of a not quite an issue thing, but issues are our cards, so you can add them that way and drag them around over there. I don't know if it helps for me to share, but I'll just quickly share it and see if we go on here. Oops. Okay. Yeah, so if you go into, so the board is up here, the top project. There's the project. These are ones I manually pulled in, and you can drag them around and stuff like that, right, from status to status. So if you do this add cards button way over here, this is all the issues within this particular organization. And so if I look for any, these are ones on seismology. Okay, there we go. It's actually all of them. So there's all the issues from the entire set of repos, detection, OpenEEW.com. So yeah, uncheck this one. Let's take rationalize the buzzer scene and then just drag it over there. And then we can ignore ones that are kind of useless at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the basics of it.
Great. So have we sort of? I mean, I'm happy to add more issues into that. There's a few I can think of straight away, especially regarding the app that we've been discussing. But I mean, as a group, have we sort of decided on what we'll, what the feature set is that we're looking for May, or do we just add issues and put it into the backlog?
Yeah, I thought my vision was at least we'd have an end-to-end system, a really basic end-to-end solid system, and something that is working in some degree for Puerto Rico as the reference implementation end-to-end, right? So it's collecting data from the sensors, it's displaying them, and it's potentially alerting to a Twitter account, right? That's like the bare minimum in many ways, or sending an email, whatever it may be. And then, so that instance should be in place, the one that's specifically for Puerto Rico, the reference implementation. In parallel to that, we would want to ensure that anybody could take what's in GitHub and, if they had all the pieces, could set up their own end-to-end system that looks like the Puerto Rico one. Obviously, they'd have to have devices and stuff like that, right? So, yeah, it should be like.
I think that's a way far. I agree with the first part what you said. Okay. Having someone stand up like Kubernetes and do what Adrian did, and take the firmware and compile and do all the. There's a lot of moving parts.
Okay.
It sounds like someone's.
All right, so let me back it back then. So you agreed though with the Puerto Rico system, we got to have some dots on a map, and that's all. Okay, so that's definitely I think that's a great baseline. What I'm getting at is when we announce and we ask the community to learn about this project, take part in this project. Obviously, we have the focus on Puerto Rico, but if we wanted open source people to come in and help out, and I think we've been luckily and successful, we've been able to do it piecemeal. What I mean is, how do we, if someone says this is awesome, I want to join this project and do something today, what can I get started with? That they're able to make sense of, one or more than of these repos, and kind of, if they make a change there, it eventually would make it back into the Puerto Rico system.
And I got a sort of a question on that. That process is, would there be a test framework, some sort of, if you make a change on something, you really want it to run through some sort of process before you can say, hey, here, have it back in the repo. I've tested it on a branch, and this is what it looks like. But I in my poking around, I couldn't find anything that might be a test framework.
Yeah, Adrian, I don't know if you want to mention any things you've done, but he's put us on that path.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lack of testing, like test automation. But as far as kind of having two different paths, what we're doing is we just started doing this actually. When someone opens up a pull request against a branch, some automation kicks off where we could run some test cases at that point. Right now, we just do linters. And then when your pull request is closed and your changes are merged into a master branch, we usually use main. You actually get automatically deployed to a staging site. So it's not the official Puerto Rican network, but it's a staging dashboard site, for example. And then I'm working on right now where when we want to switch it over to production, so all the changes to production, you have to create something called a GitHub release. So we'll say release like, give it a number like 8.0 or whatever. And then we'll go through some automation, rebuild everything, recompile, and then deploy it to the official dashboard.openeew.com site. But yeah, you're right about there's no testing. I mean, I would prefer having testing at all three of those phases. The first being when you open up a pull request, run some test cases there. When we deploy it to the staging area, run some tests there, and then of course test before you send it out to production on the main website. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, it does, but I'm just wondering more about I've got something in front of me. I make some variation, make some changes on it. Blow it into the hardware, and then to test it, is it basically letting it just run for 2 hours and seeing what comes out of it? Is it, so it's really looking at the unit testing or the integration testing of the device, because that's where stuff there. It may be as simple as, hey, just have it running for a few minutes with no data coming out of it, and then tap on the side, something simple, so that you get, basically a data generation. I mean, I've looked at the averaging software in there, so I don't know at what level is a real event, but just something that would generate an event. I mean, so I'm thinking more software.
So Neil, I don't document it anywhere, but for what I did through as I was doing firmware development, the dashboard, the live dashboard is sort of lagging my control harnesses. And so I have a dashboard that I don't publish, but is available. And you can go and select, there's a table of devices, and then you can send individual commands to it. So exercise, basically I built that dashboard so I could exercise various MQTT commands. So I can send it a earthquake alert, send data. And so when I know you're interested in the firmware, so we should just chat and I can share with you what that, well, I'll post a URL.
Offline, but I was thinking just in terms of the process, if somebody is submitting, they should probably, if they're submitting on the firmware, they should do all of that before they submit, so that there's just a suggestion that, would, but I can talk to you offline when I get going on this, John.
Sure, yeah, definitely. I'll share with everyone so that everyone sees it. I think everyone I've posted some UIs of that. So if you go there, and there's really two tabs in the upper left corner. I could share if you want me to share. Share. I hate this. All different. Share a window. Let's try this one.
I just want to add, Neil, that you're not the first person to ask this question, because we had some other people who recently obtained sensors and they were like, "Now what do I do?"
Yeah.
And I think it's good that we have some sort of framework in place for them to actually see the data coming out of their devices.
So here's a sensor. So that one is on behind me, and I can, once I select it or select a different one, see how it's sort of the selected sensor up top. I can select one that's online. So green is online, the rest are offline, and then I can send one of these commands. I've got there's actually 5 of them now.
Fantastic.
6, right? You can simulate an earthquake. You can ask it to do a firmware check. This firmware check happens when it powers on, but you also can, if it's out in the field and it's been on for a long time, you can actually ask it to do a firmware check. And if there's new firmware, it'll do the OTA and pull it down. So
that's working great.
Then you could ask it to send. So the algorithm is churning on 10 seconds of data. So you can say, send me whatever you've got in memory. Mostly it's going to be noise, but it just sends you one giant chunk of whatever 10 seconds of data looks like. Or you can turn on continuous mode, which just says, send me everything once a second. Or you can say, send me, 10 seconds worth or 60 seconds worth of data. Or you can, the last command here I just added was this force restart. And then you could actually change the sample rate of the accelerometer. Don't necessarily recommend that. This is like a fire hose. It's really just not a good idea. But what actually I do often is I'll start up my sensor and I'm really going to test other things, and I just turn off the accelerometer. That way I can go test other parts of the firmware. And so that's helpful for me. Now, this is just test harness, like me exercise the scripts. We also have, so knowing that you've got a dashboard to go and poke at your sensor, we also publish, sorry, this is so big. I was trying to present. So there's another thing where I actually document all of the commands. So if you need to, Neil, and you already know, and I actually give you the scripts here, you can run it on localhost, or you would run it against the IoT platform. And this is, you do need some secrets, which I don't publish in our public channel. But if I know who you are, and you buy me beer someday, I will give you a token. Right. And so this is also public. I'll send this. Anyway, so that was probably too much, but
that's fantastic. Thank you very
much.
Worth
asking. Yeah. I should write down.
So all of this stuff needs to go into the documentation site so people can straight away start to interact. Yeah. And that Node Red site, John, is that something that, say, Neil or myself, I mean, I know you've given me access already, but is that something that you're going to keep alive for people to work with, or is that something that we would self-host?
So this is running, it's actually running next to our device orchestration. This is public, so you don't need, I didn't password protect this, but I did password protect the control software. This should, if I haven't logged in, it should prompt me. I am already logged in here, but this is sort of all the activation code kind of flows through this set of stuff here. Too much to talk about right now, but this I sort of protect Andy because we don't want people to hijack devices. It's a container that runs in our kube cluster. This is running in our kube cluster.
Right. So on request, we could get access to the dashboard there, and we already have here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. All right. I'll stop sharing. Give back control there. Good question, Neil. So what we were talking about, like what's in our first sprint?
Yeah, so we've got April 16th, which is next Friday, because I started these last week. Just in terms of like dates we were talking about here. All right, one open. These are the milestones I was pulling together. It's always weird to tell what the things you're sharing. Anyway, so April, that's next Friday. That's 2 weeks after that on Friday. Friday after that is May 14th. May 28th is actually after the event, but it's the Friday before Memorial Day, in case there's some other stuff that doesn't quite make it in. But those are generally what we're looking at, with kind of April 15th being the closest things that we have. So these are, I think, some of the quick hitter things, but also identifying what we do need in place for these are pretty important. So I think there's a couple of things that we needed to sort out. I kind of grouped them into 4 categories in my own personal notes. Was the distribution installation of the sensors for Puerto Rico, knowing how many we would have and where they are, even if it's just a sampling of 5 to 10 of them, making sure they're out there. Making sure we've got that reference implementation for Puerto Rico up and available in a way that we've got a dashboard dedicated to it, specifically for Puerto Rico, if it makes sense, or if we just want to use the global one so everybody can see that. The ideas about open source outreach. So this kind of goes to documentation. Like if a lot of people see this news and they want to take part in it, are they ready to do something? We have some open issues, good documentation that tells them where to get started and sets their expectations. I think this is one of the ones that I'm most concerned about is when we mention this, one time we talk about this, that we're very clear that this is innovation, it's brand new. There's a community here. This is not to be relied on for life-saving alerts. And also the people who want to buy sensors, they want to be involved in this. They have that expectation set for them really early when they join. I think that helps attract people to the community, but also makes it very clear to anybody worried about these things that, it's not in place, it's not official, and work is underway to make it compliant. Anytime we talk about, for example, the specs that John just mentioned around IoT security, the president here just announced a big infrastructure thing. I'm sure there's going to be things on the horizon. Is investing in brand new infrastructure in the U.S. What does that mean for a project like this? Just having those things on our radar. Listen, this is innovation. This is what it's based on. We'd love your help. It's trying to do something, but it's not to be relied on for life-saving things.
Yeah, I would add to that, Daniel, that from my Mexican context, people have died in Mexico during false alerts of the national system. people have been so panicked by hearing the alarm that they've jumped out of their balcony and died. So, yeah, absolutely, we need to be very, very careful with how we proceed.
Exactly. And so that's the third one, the open source outreach to documentation. The fourth one is any activities that we do need is, to confirm with the Clinton Initiative or any other partners like Walmart, what they want to be able to say about this. I know they volunteered the sites, but we're kind of low key about it because they didn't want to scare people into thinking that their locations were unsafe.
Yeah. So if I can answer that, and the first thing you discussed, there is some stuff cannot be made public. So of the 50 or so organizations that have already signed up to house, 50, less than 50, I don't know, 20 organizations and 50 locations, almost all of them didn't want this to be public. And not just for any sort of liability or PR issues, but there's some sensitivity about people knowing where their locations are. So, for example, the table which I shared with some of you the other day, that can't be shared publicly because that has addresses and contact names. So, whilst I'm sure it wouldn't be a huge deal, it shouldn't be on a website or in a video. So I'm happy to sort of update everyone on the status of that, of where we are with those people and those numbers. But yeah, there's a limit. I suppose there's no harm in maybe updating the map of Puerto Rico with the locations because you can't glean too much from that. But I would say in answer to your first point that we have 50 locations. We have at the moment, I think it's 40 census in Puerto Rico, and 50 will be making their way there in the next, I'm going to say 4 weeks. They should be back soon. So we'll have 90 in total to start with. And according to the seismic network people, we should have more locations happening soon.
So, Andy, what might that mean for as far as the privacy stuff for the map and the table that we have in the dashboard? Because right now, how it works is if you don't own the sensor, it truncates your longitude and latitude down to a 100th decimal place. Is that enough? I know we talked about this before, but that's fine enough for people to, yeah.
Yeah, that's enough. I had mentioned that in a call once, so that no one answered me in any negative way. I can try and be more explicit about that in my next call with the science people in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
But I think that's enough. For example, I looked at my location the other day, and it didn't hit my house at all. Like that, those decimal places really makes a big difference. I guess if you're a Walmart and there's no one nearby you, then it's going to be obvious where it is. But
yeah, we talked about putting in maybe some controls also to let people be able to determine that for themselves on the dashboard, which is maybe something we could think about adding. Are any of the sensors that were sent to Puerto Rico in the system yet? Are they in the database?
I don't think so. Pedro, by the way, you're welcome to go and to liaise with the people there and get yourself a sensor to test. I think you'd mentioned that.
Yes, I might do that actually this week before the weekends. So we're gonna do some testing.
They're already in there
in the Science Trust. Yeah. Okay, cool. I'll connect with them to see when I can pass by.
Great. Speak to Annie. Annie's the one in charge there.
So when are they planning to start deploying those sensors?
So there's a bit of a process. To be honest, I've been writing some emails this morning about it and yesterday because, so some people are not as active as I'd like them to be. So the next stage is for us as a sort of team. I say us, I mean, anyone here is welcome if they want to participate. But I say us as in the people who've been speaking to the Science Trust. So we have this list of 50 locations. And in that list, we have to discard any ones that are not suitable, which means locations which are not of a good structural type, locations which have vibrations in them, like machinery or construction, or locations that have unreliable internet. Some of them turn off the internet on the weekends. So all of those locations we need to discard. And that's quite straightforward, but I need some assistance on the ground for this exercise. So I'm sort of waiting to hear from several folks as to some questions that I've asked. But I'm going to say to you that there's no reason we couldn't have, a percentage of those, I'm just going to say a third, ready to go. Say the Walmart locations, that's about a third of the locations. We could just, those seem pretty trustworthy. I'm sure we could get those up and running soon. I mean, for sure, way before May the 28th, is it? We should have a big batch in place. I would have hoped by the end of this month. Yeah. Because we have someone on the ground there. So this lady called Anjali. She's a student who's now full time on this project. Apparently, she's working with the seismic network there. So she's been assigned to this, and she's helping us with deployment and liaising with people. So she's sort of volunteered to sort of take the sensors to the sites and do stuff. Yeah, it does need to move faster though.
So Andy, I'm sorry. So you sent all the devices to Annie, and she in turn was distributing. Is that right?
Yeah. So Annie's so she's sitting on 40 devices.
Okay.
And then she's going to either people will come and get them, like the Walmart contact or the other businesses who've signed up, or Anjali will take them and install them.
Okay. Got it.
So, for example, the seismic network locations, Anjali would be the one doing that. Of course, we can modify that. If anybody wanted to come and grab one and they were trustworthy, we could do it another way.
Right.
But presumably that shouldn't hold us up, right? Just because we're waiting on that live data, that shouldn't hold up some of the other activities that we have at the moment.
No. I don't think at all. I think it's something we are not ready to start receiving those data yet. It shouldn't take too long either, I think.
And by default, they're configured to send data to the data set anyway, even if the dashboard system's not collecting?
Yeah. So before sending them, I personally flashed all 40 of them with the latest release of firmware.
Yeah, but right now there's nothing writing the data anywhere, right? Or is there something?
Nope, it's just a live data stream.
Yeah. Okay.
And Andy, I also have been somewhat questioning on whether the certificate that you flash the devices with is going to be sufficient, because the firmware, the OTA replaces the firmware. It doesn't replace the SPIFS image. I'm not sure if you can do an OTA of the SPIFS image. I don't think you can. The workaround is I'm forever going to have to hard code the server certificate in the source code as opposed to using SPIFs.
Why can't you OTA the SPIFs? It's just a partition.
I don't know. I'd have to go read if I can do that.
Okay. And also, why? And this is related to the thing about the renewal of certificates that you're worried about.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, but so when I read around the subject, it felt to me that the certificates were not replaced; they were just renewed.
We need to prove that, and I was more hopeful after I got all worried. But I would love I think Adrian and I kind of need to renew one of the certificates on dashboard just to see if the firmware still works.
So I've used Let's very quick. I've used Let's Encrypt for a few sites that I've done before, and nowadays it's called CertBot, right? It's been renamed, and CertBot Renew seems to be really straightforward. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if the file has actually changed at all when you do a CertBot renew, or whether it's kept as it was.
I mean, so far it seems like it doesn't make a new cert. So what I did was, the Kubernetes cert manager is using CertBot under the hood anyways. It's just going through YAMLs, right? So what I did was I went into the renewal date and I made it so that it would renew 5 minutes after I went in and edited it. And then it went through the automation process, took like 10 seconds. And then the new cert quote unquote new cert that was created was exactly the same as the previous one. So I did it at least once. And like just as a kind of FYI, I've actually ran the renew certificate automation like 3 or 4 times since last month, because every time you add, for example, we add a new site, I don't create a new cert for it. I append the new site to the existing dashboard cert. So I made one cert for the dashboard, and then I added the downloads.com to it. Then I added the device management to it. And so far, I mean, if you guys haven't had any issues with the certificate, that means that they haven't changed. Probably.
Yes, I'm hopeful. But,
no, but like I said,
my
I can
implementation just went in like 2 weeks ago, and I've been waiting for a cert to actually get renewed so I can test it. So if you could run that.
Yeah, I could do that. Well, we got like 30 minutes in between the meeting with Daniel and this meeting, so it's no big.
You can do a false renew, even if it's not close to expiring.
Yeah, so renewing is like a 10 or 15-second process. It's not crazy. So that's something that's doable.
A test cycle for me is like a couple of hours of actually setting up all the, you have to set up the firmware. It's not like I could just do it in a blink.
All right. Yeah. So what I could do too is there's a paper trail that gets left on Kubernetes. So from my side, the certificates get turned into Kubernetes secrets, and I could generate a renewed new secret, and then like we could just switch back and forth very easily through Ingress, and then when you're ready, we'll just test it.
Yeah,
that makes any sense.
But I probably just maybe you and I should take an action item to test the certificate upgrade cycle process, and I'll just put 2 hours. And mostly, like, you can do your piece in 15 seconds, and then I have to like set up like the whole scenario to force the upgrade so that it would go check and download and do all the steps. But I probably just need to block an hour or two on my calendar.
Man, I really do hope it works, because I'm glad we use Cert Manager to do this, like to automatically generate it, because it says set it and forget it straight up for me. But
cool.
But yeah, I'll help you test. So I guess beyond that, we're getting towards the end. I mean, it sounds like I talked to Seismology. John seems like he has an MVP. Size has an MVP. Dashboard has an MVP. So it sounds like we're mostly good. There's some stuff on the infrastructure that I want to do too. I just sent it to Daniel to take a peek at. But essentially, I think for me, the MVP is I got to containerize and deploy all of the new repos you guys are going to make. So John's making a new repo for writing to CloudEnt. Seismology is making a new repo for data dumping, and I had to containerize Seismology. So that's 3 repos that need that work. And then Andy, we talked about locking down the Kubernetes cluster. So I have to do that too. So only a few of us have admin rights to the cluster. And then I did the staging and production deployments. We separated that. I guess the other thing is I could do something called auto scaling, which John, we ran into this issue before with when you create multiple pods, right? The MQTT starts freaking out. So there's some more work there. It's not as just easy as turning it on.
No. So MQTT very specifically is not shared subscription to model. You can't have multiple receivers. So if you subscribe to a topic, only one instance should worry about. There's a whole scalable MQTT conversation, which is a much longer journey. So you can't scale the device orchestration too easily.
Well, I think that, so yes, I mean, my point was that I think we may not be able to do it for most of these then, because almost everything's going to communicate with MQTT, right? Because that's the centralized data point. So that means that we could just not turn on auto scaling, which means that when we do an update on the Puerto Rico system, that when the update happens, the site and whatever components being currently updated will be down for that duration of the update. There's really nothing we can do about it. I mean, like,
so what I can do is I can rotate. What I'll be able to do is I could rotate tokens and I can deploy. I could deploy a deactivated, so you'll have the running production one, and then I could deploy inactive, and then when the old one comes down, I can just log in and then turn on the new one. It'll be a very small overlap, very, very small gap. Yeah, we should test that too, but hopefully it's not like some often thing we're going to be pushing new versions of that device mat orchestration.
Well, I mean, wouldn't this be an issue for the other pieces too? I'm more concerned about the things that get pushed more frequently, like the dashboard, for example. It's going to have MQTT connections as well. So if we have two dashboards up at the same time, they both would connect to IoT, Walton IoT in theory.
They're going to have to use different. They're always going to have to use different tokens.
Okay. Yeah. So well, my point is that I won't turn on auto scaling for any of the components until this issue we're talking about is solved. But that, like I said, that comes with a price. So every time we update, something's going to go down, and then we have to be aware of that. So if we merge things into the dashboard once a day, it means that there's going to be 1 to 2 minute downtime every time that deploy happens.
Yeah, that's just the nature of how MQTT subscriptions work.
Yeah,
MQTT 5 handles it better, and there's this whole it's too long of a conversation now right now, but it's a rather new set of technologies.
All right, so I guess following that up, I mean, I don't know where you guys are on Prometheus and doing general monitoring as part of the MVP. So that I feel like we could fit into the May 25th timeframe, but it doesn't seem like a true MVP item if we're not gonna, care about 5 nines of uptime. Should we force it to be there before May instead of working on something else?
I mean, from the dashboard, I'd like some sort of monitoring in there by the time it's a wide enough audience by May. I don't know if Prometheus is going in other repos or not, but
it's mostly for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say let's put it as part of an MVP for the dashboard at least. I mean, we're we discussed a little bit of what the MVP for the dashboard would look like by May, and we have some pretty good progress made on it, and I think it's just as we talked about, Adrian, just filling out what we currently have prototypes for, and then getting the production stuff set. But I would, I think having some sort of monitoring as people are using it, it would for me be part of the MVP. But it depends on how much more we have to do with it. I mean, I thought a lot of the the scripts originally connecting it, I think we already know how to do, right?
Yeah, that part is there. And then it's mostly I gotta deploy it to Kubernetes and then try to figure out how to slap it behind a username and password. And then that's, like I said, it's doable. It's definitely fit. It's gonna take a couple days, maybe a week or something like that. But it's just the question is, should we be working on something else instead? But it sounds like this should be MVP then, according to what you said.
Yeah, it's part of one of those. It's kind of one of those things that, like testing, that, the testing is. I'd love if we had like one more node developer to write some integration tests, because I started. A lot of the authentication tests and a lot of the authentication routes in the dashboard are behind some testing right now, because I just wrote them in as I was writing the authentication piece. But as all the routes, whatever the last routes that I added, I can't remember what I did like last week. Oh, for the sensors and whatnot, those don't have, the route testing on them. It's just some of those things that you just have to throw kind of hours against. But I would, I think part of the MVP is to have kind of a testing suite, at least for the back end routes, because as long as the back end routes work sort of enough of a confirmation that the rest of the dashboard will work and also integrate with the onboarding process that the provisioning app has. So I would say that like that's Prometheus and testing are one of those kind of side things that we have there to consider, but I would like them part of the MVP.
All right. I mean, also, we could test the routes by issuing curl commands once things are deployed into staging. So that's a possible path.
Yeah, and I mean, the integration testing using Supertest for Node is not that much different than just sending off a bunch of curl commands. I mean, it's basically just sending some mock data to a route and seeing what the response is. So whether you do that in Node or you do it in curl, it's kind of the same thing. So yeah, that's easier. In fact, that's writing one line or a few lines instead of all whole suites together. That might be an easier option.
Just going back to another piece that Daniel had mentioned, talking about you had mentioned Twitter, Daniel, and I thought we're not going to have time, I'm assuming, to have the app have an alerting system in it or have the push notifications working. I'm just assuming that's going to take a bit more app development, and we don't have many hands on deck. But Twitter makes it's a nice idea. So I thought we could ask the Linux Foundation perhaps to host a Twitter account for the project. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that would be good. I know Adrian, in his early experimentation with kind of doing the end-to-end flow of everything, had worked with a Twitter app account. I know they've changed it recently, but Adrian, is that something we can reuse simply?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely usable if we don't have like each user attach their own Twitter account to it. But if we say like have a generic one that we set up for the dashboard, then that'll be a lot easier. It's pretty much just reading off MQTT. When I see an event like an earthquake, then I'll just send out a tweet. It's nearly that simple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. If we have, so we just need the one, just like you have Grio alerta, that Twitter handle for Mexico. Literally just something that is clearly documented. This is experimental. This just shows if anything's been detected, and that really, in my mind, gets us the end-to-end, right? The sensor to the detection, to the display on the dashboard, to the push, to
Perfect.
And that, I think that shows that this is real, right? In that it is an end-to-end system. We've proven the concept. We need additional help to take it further. That's really what our message should be in showing an end-to-end system.
Perfect. And I always thought about the work that we're all doing here as more the infrastructure side, and that ultimately someone in Puerto Rico might decide that they want to create some novel way of getting the alert into schools or something else, or onto a radio station. And so it's not our job to foresee all of those channels. We just generate the alert.
Right. Right. Exactly. And that's where I think Pedro, we had some ideas about how do we do a hackathon for someone who wants to learn how to use the IBM cloud, use Node-RED, use Kubernetes, use React Native with the Carbon, design, and build your own app or integrate this into your thing in some way. And that's really where I think the ecosystem piece really explodes, is not only in sensors, but also in the alert mechanisms. While Grio owns the data within, it's kind of the at least is in charge of that, has control over it, has access to whatever it needs as kind of the responsible.
You mean OpenEEW, not Grio?
Yeah. The community or the people within it.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think that our partner Engine 4, they would love to host a few workshops. They actually still have the first sensor that you send us, Andy. So I think once we get closer to a version that's ready to teach people, we could go to them and we could set up a workshop between a few hundred people.
So that sensor should pretty much work. I'll have to double check the wiring because maybe we use different pins on the ESP32, but potentially that should work. Let me double check.
Nice, because we have 3, I believe, that are installed right now. So
I feel like they should
update
work.
the firmware. Okay, cool. I'll follow up with that.
Yeah, I still haven't, because I also sent you some of the old Raspberry Pis, and I have no issue publishing what the boards that we did for Raspberry Pis with the accelerometer. I just never wanted to confuse people, and it just, it's much more of an expensive solution than the ESP32. But if anyone was ever interested, I could always just publish that.
Yeah, I think it's an archived repo, maybe at least historical, because I think we get a lot of questions. I've seen a few flow through. It's like, oh, have you considered this other architecture? What about this other? How does this compare versus the iteration before? It's at least something you can point to and say, this is all the hard lessons we learned. We've come this far to this selection. Here's our decision points that got us here. So I think it's valuable.
Because one of the novel aspects of what we're doing is we're pushing everything to the cloud, so the device is doing very little work, and I think people who are into Raspberry Pi sort of feel an inclination to do a lot on the device itself, which is against what we've been working towards. But yeah, I guess I could just publish it as an archive.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea as well, because maybe someone wants to test the code, but they don't have access to the board, but a lot of people have access to Raspberry Pi. So I think it'd just be worth it for educational purposes, like Dan said.
Okay, I'll dig it up.
Now, if I were to prioritize, that's not an MVP thing that we need for May, though.
Correct.
Don't worry. If we go down the whole, let's redo the Raspberry Pi implementation. Having not seen that code, Andy, I don't know how much work it would be to open source.
Yeah, no, it would be a pain. It's really reliable, that code, because we've been using it for 2 years on a number of devices. But the issue there is the format is now going to be out of sync with what we've been developing. We're not going to be able to control the device in the way we control the other devices. It's going to be an outlier. So I completely agree with you. Let's put that on the side until there's a burning need to revive it. But if anybody wants, I'll share it with you. If anybody cares. We've hit 3 o'clock. So any other questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Not me anyway. Maybe someone else does.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Well, I'm gonna stop the recording then, and we're meeting every week, right? So is there any communications we should be doing midweek? I guess we just got to work on the project.
Yeah. I would say if everybody takes away what they think they need to do, put those issues into whatever repo makes sense, and then can drag them into the top level plan with the milestones. I think that makes sense. I've done most of the milestones. I still have a couple more repos to do, but that's, I think, what we do. And then we'll just review next week or in Slack when things are advancing. And on each of those 4 fronts, really, the sensor distribution, the system itself, the end-to-end system, what we want to do for documentation and our front door to new developers, and then anything we need to do about comms and getting that stuff right. So I've got a meeting in 20 minutes internally at IBM where we're going to talk more on the comms. I'm giving them a bigger update on what we're doing here, so they're aware, and they may be interested in asking for certain other things up front or milestones that they need to achieve on their own to help support this. So those are just other things we have to work through as well.
That's great. And Daniel, do we need to go back to Becca from the Clinton Global? I mean, is there anything more we need to know about? I guess your comms people will want to know more about the May event.
Yes, exactly. And so our previous experience as IBM with a Clinton Global Initiative commitment to action, just for everybody's reference, is we did one 2 years ago saying that we would educate 10,000 students on cloud technology. So that was it. That took a year long of a lot of IBMers to do, but we did it, right? So we were able to claim victory and say, listen, we reached 10,000 students. So that's their familiarity with the commitment to action. So we don't want to scare them and say, we're going to go, do this crazy high level major commitment to do all those activities. So they need to be clear about in the CTA, what's being signed up for. And I think we had talked to Becca, and we're comfortable with what you had in your draft was, listen, we're talking about the work today. We're talking about inviting a community into this new activity. And we've already gotten all these other, there's no forward-looking commitment necessarily, but
yeah, exactly.
to show what we've done so far as our commitment to it that's been completed. And this is where we want to go next with the rest of the community, that it doesn't just sit on IBM or Grio or any individual in the community.
So it sort of sounds then like the version 1 that we're talking about for our sprints here is more or less what we're offering in the call to action, which is that we're going to have this proof of concept system running in the Caribbean, built by our community, and yeah. Okay, folks. But if there's nothing else, I'm going to go and have a late lunch.
All right, have a good one. See ya.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Great. Well, now I'm excited. So we'll see how this goes for next week. And
Yep.
get this in place.
Yep.
Okay.
See you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.